Pyramids of Mars, the third serial of Doctor Who's 13th season, first broadcast in 4 parts from the 25th of October to the 15th of November 1975. This was another story that, like The Curse of Fenric or City of Death, whenever I asked which classic story I should try to see on social media, Pyramids of Mars would always slot somewhere in there. Everyone would always bring it up. And I guess the reason I didn't do it for a while is because with Tom Baker's Doctor, because he was the longest serving Doctor, I always felt like I've got the most of him in terms of the Doctor with 22 serials, but I always seem to be a long way off completing him. But I finally decided to have another go at it. I bought Pyramids of Mars, I stuck it in, and like people said, it is a good story. The Fourth Doctor, played once again by Tom Baker, and his companion, Sarah Jane Smith, played by Elizabeth Sladen, they're returning back to Earth, back to Unit in 1980, when they find the TARDIS knocked off course, and they arrive at an old country house in 1911. The Doctor eventually surmises that this will eventually become a Unit facility, but it's not quite there yet, and he knows that this particular house was eventually burned down. Now, in doing so, in looking around the house, they discover a man named Ibrahim Nameen, played by Peter Mayock, and he is attempting to communicate with an ancient being named Sutekh, played by Gabriel Wolfe. He eventually manages to make contact, and, well, Sutekh's kind of minion who arrives through eventually ends up killing Nameen and assuming the form of a man who had previously entered the tomb, which has now been reactivated, that being Marcus Scarman, played by Bernard Archard. Now, Sutekh is from an ancient alien race called the Osirans. He was a member, there were about 740 Osirans, but Sutekh, or Set, was one of the names he went by, they kind of inspired kind of ancient Egyptian mythology on Earth, and Sutekh was eventually imprisoned by the Osirans, including their leader, Horus. He was imprisoned within a pyramid on Mars, which is overseen by the Eye of Horus. And having finally been reawoken by Scarman's expedition in Egypt, Sutekh now wants to manipulate events so that he can get the humans to build a missile which, when fired, will hit Mars, will destroy the pyramid, and will free Sutekh himself, allowing him to once again rule the universe. So the Doctor and Sarah Jane have to find some way to stop him, and of course along the way they encounter a series of unusual characters. I've already mentioned Nameen and Marcus Scarman. They also encounter Scarman's brother, Lawrence Scarman, played by Michael Sheard, who helps them out, and an old friend of Scarman's named Dr. Warlock, played by Peter Copley. But there are one or two things in this story that I'll admit I am a fan of. For example, Sarah Jane says in part 2, well, if this is going to be dangerous, why don't we just go back to 1980? Because, well, we know that Sutekh didn't end up taking over the world because I'm from 1980 and I know he didn't destroy the world in 1911. To which the Doctor proves to her that they can't go back and do that because when he takes them to 1980, they find it a desolate wasteland, an apocalyptic landscape, which is said time is effectively always in flux. Or in situations like this, time is in flux, and basically if they don't stop Sutekh, there will be no 1980 to go back to. Now, stuff like this became a lot easier to explain once Back to the Future came out in 1985. I mean, the 10th Doctor even uses that as a comparison himself in the 2007 episode of Shakespeare Code. Like, how best to explain this? Oh, Back to the Future. It's like Back to the Future. The film. No, the novelization. Yes, the film. Martin McFly goes back and changes history, and he starts fading away. Oh my god, am I going to fade? You and the whole history, whole future of humankind. It ends right now in 1599 if we don't stop it. And while I said that Back to the Future wouldn't end up coming out for another 5 years, and I do know the concept of kind of time ripples did exist before that. I do like how they managed to address it. Like Sarah Jane just says, well, why can't we go home? The Doctor shows her why they can't. I do like that. And Sutekh is using a series of robots which are disguised to look like mummies, which I'll admit they're not the greatest effect. I mean, it's pretty clear that they're just actors kind of in wrapped up suits, but at the same time they're not the greatest effect, but they're effective enough. I mean, I think they're effective enough. I mean, it's quite cool how they don't actually give them any faces. Like, they don't have to look kind of monstrous underneath. You don't have to have somebody going the entire time. They're just kind of blank creatures walking around, which, considering that they're robots designed to do menial work for Sutekh, I think it's quite effective. I do also like how sometimes they get around certain problems. Like, towards the end of part 3, the Doctor and Sarah Jane come up with a plan that Sutekh plans to fire a missile from there, and they manage to find a way. They find some explosives or some highly volatile material, which the Doctor is able to disguise himself as one of the mummy robots and place it next to the missile and get Sarah Jane to shoot at it with a shotgun. To which, when she does that, we see the explosion start, but then it seemingly doesn't work. It seemingly doesn't fire. And that's because Sutekh is using his mental abilities to prevent the explosion, to which he then sends Scarman to remove it, to which the Doctor then has to travel to Sutekh's tomb using part of the machinery left behind in order to break Sutekh's concentration so the material will explode and destroy the missile. To which I do like their kind of solution to that. To which the final part shows Sarah Jane, the Doctor, Scarman, and one of his robots heading to Mars, to specifically the Pyramid, in order to finally release Sutekh once and for all. To which, at one point, Sarah Jane ends up getting trapped, to which she's seemingly trapped in a chamber, and the Doctor has to choose. Well, they're actually trapped by Horus, or two of Horus's robots, and Horus presents them with a riddle, to which they say, if they fail the riddle, then Sarah Jane will be killed. Like, all the oxygen will be taken out of the chamber that she's in. And I do like the riddle that they've got, that they went with. It is a riddle I am familiar with, and I do ultimately like how the Doctor kind of works it out. Like, they say to him, okay, we've got one robot here that will always tell the truth, and the other that will always lie. To which button do you press? Well, which button do you press to release your friend? To which the Doctor eventually thinks it through and says to one of the he's allowed to ask one of the robots one question. So he asks the robot, which button will the other robot point to? To which this to me is a great riddle, because the one that will lie, or the one that will tell the truth, will point to the button that will kill her, and the other robot will also point to the button that kills her, to which we know that the one who will tell the truth was saying that button is the one that will kill her, and the other robot is going, well, he will say you should push that button, which means then you just have to press the other button, to which I'm familiar with that riddle, and it's a great one, and I do like how they ultimately do it. It ultimately ends with Sutekh managing to destroy the Eye of Horus, the thing that was keeping him prisoner, and the Doctor, and as he makes his way out, the Doctor is able to extend the time tunnel, which means that Sutekh dies before he reaches the end of it, having travelled something like 7,000 years. However, during the process of this ends up setting fire to the mansion, and as the Doctor says, well, we'd probably best get out of here. We don't want to get charged with starting a fire, and enough trouble with that in 1666. I have to presume he's referring to the Great Fire of London with that, but yeah. So, Pyramids of Mars, I don't necessarily think I view it quite as highly as everyone else, but I do agree it's a great story, and it does have one of my favourite pairings in Classic Who, that being Tom Baker and Elizabeth Sladen. I'll admit I did prefer Sladen a little bit more with Jon Pertwee's Doctor, but, you know, No, I tell a lie there. Sorry, I did prefer her slightly more with Tom Baker's Doctor. I preferred Casey Manning with John Pertwee's Doctor, but yeah. I do think this is a great pairing, and I do agree with people that this is a great episode. I don't know if I view it quite as highly as everybody else, but I definitely think it's a good one. So, Pyramids of Mars, I definitely give a thumbs up. So there you go, that's my quick little thoughts on Pyramids of Mars. Will we in my next classic story? Once again, at this point, I don't know. I'll have to wait and see. Till next time, see ya.